This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Wake Up to Money from BBC 5 Live.
Hello, welcome to the Wake Up to Money podcast, where a former chief of staff of the Afghan central bank tells us of his concerns for his country's economic stability.
The future of economy for Afghanistan is really very alarming.
More from him shortly. Elsewhere, the pandemic habits that have changed us. We're still spending even more than ever on takeaways, but is the Zoom boom over? And it's transfer deadline day. Premier League clubs spending £962 million so far. After a year of no fans, where are clubs getting the money?
If you look at where that spending has been concentrated, it's within, the more dominant clubs in the market.
Wake Up to Money with Sean Farrington.
Has August told you whether or not the pandemic has really changed your habits for good or not? Surely wouldn't be the month ordinarily of takeouts. We've had restaurants reopening. We've had the opportunity to do that. But have you still been using those apps? Calling up, there's been local services popping up more, haven't there? Just even calling up your local restaurants and getting them to deliver stuff for you one way or another. Has that become more of a habit for you? We're going to hear a bit later from one business who's got a bunch of loyal customers they've never met over the last year that have stayed loyal, even though things are starting to open up on our high street a bit. We've got that. We've got the working from home. The next few weeks going to be big, isn't it, for people making those decisions? We've had the latest from Zoom, of course, one of the companies that are massively able to cash in over the course of the pandemic, telling us about what it thinks will happen over the weeks and months to come. And holidays as well. Front page of the Mirror today, I see, we do love to be beside our seaside. The holidaying in the UK boom set to continue into next year. Have you had a trip in the last few weeks? Maybe the last few weeks, the story dominating the front pages, the headlines of the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. Last night the US pulled its remaining troops out of Afghanistan. Maybe that has been the story for you that has generated most conversation amongst friends. You may have family who've served in Afghanistan. You may have served there yourself. Have you got a view on this ending of a 20-year conflict, the US in Afghanistan, triggered by those 9/11 attacks of 2001? British forces left at the weekend. The sky over Kabul was filled with gunfire as the Taliban fired into the air in celebration, and that was watched by the BBC's Lise Doucette.
Well, I don't think we need to look at the news wires. You just have to listen to what's happening in the skies above us in Kabul. If that isn't confirmation, I don't know what is. Just listen to the crackle of gunfire.
Now, America's top military commander in the region, General Kenneth McKenzie, said last night that the last aircraft left Kabul with the US ambassador on board.
I'm here to announce the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the military mission to evacuate American citizens, third country nationals, and vulnerable Afghans. The last C-17 lifted off from Hamid Karzai International Airport on August 30th, this afternoon, at 3:29 p.m. East Coast time. And the last manned aircraft is now clearing the airspace above Afghanistan.
Now, for the 38 million Afghans who are waking up today, looking at their country, the economy in their country right now, many questions over what will happen next. Wake Up to Money's James Graham caught up with Sarajuddin Issa, who is a former chief of staff at the Afghan central bank, now an academic in London. And he started by asking him about the impact of so many people fleeing the country.
One could argue that the brain drain that has started a long time ago was very much on a dramatic peak. A lot of human capital are leaving the country, which is kind of a concern. Who is going to stay in the country? I know there are threat, concern to their lives, but everybody cannot leave Afghanistan, right?
Do you have any figures? Can you kind of quantify the number of graduates or the number of people with those qualifications that are thought to have left or be trying to leave?
There are around 300,000 people working in this public sector, right? Of these, around 7,200 who have had master degrees. And I know there were 42,000 who have had bachelors. And as you know, most of the people who have had these higher postgraduate degrees, they've been hired by international organizations, which qualify most of them for SIV, Special Immigrant Visa or Special Immigration Visa. And most of those organizations pay them much higher, much larger than other sectors, including the government. So that is more than the economy. The brain drain is a kind of big concern for Afghanistan, if not for the Taliban.
I mean, what's the direct impact of losing those people?
First of all, it will impact the government. And I don't know what type of government the Taliban are thinking of. They need expertise. They need professionals. They only have fighters. And how they would not be able to run the government if they are not appointing or hiring people with higher education degrees or expertise.
With all this going on, how's it affecting the economy? I mean, what's life like for people living there?
You may have heard that the banking industry has just opened, started operations since yesterday. The central bank, the first thing they announced, and it seems that the liquidity is like a big problem for the banking industry at the moment, just like the financial crisis of 2008. So that seems to be an issue in Afghanistan, given the IMF sanctions, given the Federal Reserve sanctions about the 10 billion reserves that the Taliban government or the Taliban cannot access at the moment. So the central bank yesterday announced that any deposit holder or any bank account holder cannot withdraw more than $200 equivalent on a weekly basis. I know they stated it is temporary, but this is like a big concern, and it shows that liquidity is a big problem. So the flow of cash, which was one of the main tools that the central bank over the past 20 years maintained price stability, maintained exchange rate, is no longer in their hands. And so in a very short term, the flow of US dollars to Afghan economy will be a big concern. And given also that aid money is not being pumped into the Afghan economy. Let's not forget that 75% of the previous government expenditure was financed by the aid money, and now that the aid money is very uncertain. So the future of economy for Afghanistan is really very alarming.
That's Sarajuddin Issa, who is the former chief of staff at the Afghan Central Bank, now an academic in London, laying out there what may be the course next for the Afghanistan economy. Swetha Ramachandran is with me this morning, investment manager at GAM Investments. Morning to you, Swetha.
Morning, Sean.
Morning. I mean, we've talked about many economies around the world, Swetha. When you look at not just what is happening in Afghanistan right now, but the state of the economy over recent months and years going into this sort of deterioration, as the economy will have, it seems, in the next few weeks. I mean, how do international markets, the countries and the banks around the world that will, potentially be there for funding for countries like Afghanistan, how will they view what's going on right now?
So the situation for Afghanistan is somewhat unique in that this is an economy that has never really been fully integrated in the global supply chain, for instance. So where we have had instances of hyperinflation in Latin America, that has really affected, say, the value of the sovereign debt that's been issued by those countries. But Afghanistan, as your guest pointed out, more than 40% of its GDP has actually relied on foreign aid. Its exports are quite narrowly restricted to certain key markets. More than about half of its exports are to its neighboring country, Pakistan. So it hasn't been fully integrated into the global economy for this to spook the wider global economy. However, it's a great matter of concern for the Afghani population as inflation starts to rear its head, and particularly these cash shortages then fuel a sort of a self-fulfilling panic almost. So that will be something that people are watching for in terms of what it means for the population of Afghanistan, potentially their need to perhaps resettle and what impact that might have on neighboring economies.
And will, some of those neighboring economies and, China, Russia, looking at what has happened in Afghanistan as an opportunity to increase their influence if they're able to assist with that financial flow and preventing that crunch that we heard the chief of staff of the Afghan Central Bank talking about there?
Well, certainly, Russia is already posturing itself in terms of warning the West not to curb the flow of foreign exchange reserves that have currently been restricted to the Taliban government that are held in US dollars. And that seems to potentially be a play that they may be making. I do think the neighboring economies, while they could view this as an opportunity, will also perhaps be quite cautious, given that they're not exactly clear about exactly who they're dealing with and what policies the Taliban government may have in place about their relationships with their neighbors.
Wake Up to Money from BBC Radio 5 Live.
And I've got Diane Palumbo with me this morning to talk about, travel in particular, Sales and Marketing Director for Ski World, which is the largest independent ski operator in the UK, also spokesperson for the trade body Seasonal Businesses in Travel. Morning to you, Diane.
Good morning, Sean. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I've got plenty of travel questions to be asking you this morning. There's lots of headlines being made. But I just want to ask you about takeaways yourself. Has it changed you or your family at all? The fact that it is so much easier and there's so much more choice now to get something online.
I confess. Yes, it has. It has. We love food, and we have had pre-pandemic the habit of going out to eat at selections of lovely local restaurants. Like everybody, pandemic came, we closed the hatches, bolted down, and then gradually started to lift the periscope. And the periscope was usually a call to a local restaurant for delivery or curbside collection. And we've started to kick the habit, interestingly, because we both became aware of the amount of packaging that we were using, sauces that normally come to the table in your little glass jars or poured onto your plate. Actually, they were coming in so much plastic and so much rubbish that combined with food delivery from our supermarkets led to our bins and recycling bins being double the size pre-pandemic. So we're weaning ourselves off now.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's it feels like that, the recycling and limiting plastic debate that we were having so much in the run up to the pandemic took a back seat for quite a while, and you wouldn't have seen a lot of the stories around now as we gear up for COP26, the big climate change conference, and you're going to see a lot more stories about changing habits, stuff around electric cars needing to be taxed more in the papers today. Having to think about that a bit more. What was the main order of choice for you, Diane? What's your new go-to that wouldn't have been before the pandemic?
Oh, we have the most fantastic Spanish tapas restaurant round the corner who never did deliveries prior to the pandemic. And I would say that was our special go-to.
Nice. 85058, hashtag wake up to money. Have your takeaway habits changed? Is there a local restaurant for you? Let me know. Let's get the taste buds going a bit earlier on this morning, shall we? We can have tapas. It's still August. It's all right. If you want to get in touch on social media, hashtag wake up to money as well. Now, Diane, looking at the state of the travel industry right now, I mean, there's always updates going on. We've got the old traffic light list to keep us busy, haven't we? So if you're looking at that at the moment, latest changes over the weekend, the government moved Thailand onto the red list. So travellers will have to quarantine in a government-approved hotel on their return. Other countries, Finland, the Azores, were moved from amber to green. How are things looking right now, Diane, for the state of the booking holiday abroad industry?
Tough. I think if I work in the travel industry and I'm finding it hard to name what's happening, then that's got to be a good indicator. And I think my big concerns are, outbound travel by the UK public. Pre-pandemic, there was a study that was released by ABTA, I think, in 2017. So travel generated £45 billion of expenditure within the UK before people left, effectively. So it has in the past been a major contributor to the UK economy. Now we look at the summer, and some travel companies in the summer, the income for the summer holidays generates around 2/3 of their total income, and that tides them over the winter months. Well, with confused messaging, introduction of Amber Plus, constant changing, it's having a braking effect on people's desire to travel, and therefore it's having a braking effect on the contribution that our desire to travel could make to the economy.
Well, and also the other thing we're talking about today a bit, Diane, about the permanent change in habits, and you see these headlines about us loving to be beside the seaside, and the fact that, some of these numbers, the boost in bookings for next summer continues. Some inquiries up by 74%, saying one sector of the sort of domestic holiday industry. I mean, are you starting to see people now who ordinarily would be coming to you, and even a few months ago were thinking, I just need that ski trip, now actually going, well, maybe they're not coming to you anymore. They've had a good holiday this summer that's worked really well in the UK. Certain things have been more straightforward than they might have been travelling abroad, seeing 5-hour queues at Heathrow on the front page of the Times this morning, and them going, do you know what, maybe skiing isn't for us anymore.
Good question. And Sean, I'd venture to say I need to take you on a skiing holiday. Don't take that the wrong way, because skiing is a hobby. And in fact, if we had the quality of snow and mountains in the UK that you can find in Europe or North America, then that argument for skiing may be true. But the very best skiing in the world, unfortunately, is outside of these shores. And I think skiers are hobbyists. Once you get the taste of the unbelievable views at the top of the world, the incredible purity of the air, and then the physical sensation of skiing, an addiction starts, which means you will pursue your hobby, even if it means longer queues and more paperwork to fill out.
Interesting.
But what we are noticing is that people's desire to travel, both for summer, because the weather forecast started just now with cloudy again, people's desire to travel, it is possibly more. But we've got so many braking effects on that desire, some of which could be addressed to release that, that it's causing people to hesitate.
I wonder if people are thinking twice. Let me know what is going to persuade you to make that booking next summer. Right, let's speak to somebody who we know likes a holiday, particularly a cruise going round in a circle around Singapore. Katie Silver joins us live from Singapore.
You take what you can get, Sean.
I know.
You take what you can get.
Is skiing on the shortlist for you, Katie?
I mean, I like that description. I love skiing, and I haven't been in a long while. I mean, I can't wait till I can go again.
Yeah.
But there's actually just been announced here what's called a vaccinated travel lane. So it's our first ability to travel without having to do 2 weeks in a hotel that comes into effect next month. To Germany is where we can go. So,
right. So if we can't get hold of anybody in Singapore in a few weeks' time, we know what you're all
check
up
the bee halls of Munich. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Now, Katie, there's a story doing good business online this morning, one of the most read stories on BBC Online, about how China is dealing with its kids playing a lot more video games than they were before. The regulators stepping involved. Now, we talk a lot about Chinese regulation and how it works very differently in China to how we run things in the UK. But what is it they're doing, and what are their concerns?
It is quite a radical move. So they're limiting the amount that children or those under 18 are allowed to game to 3 hours a week. And if you say, how can they enforce that? Well, there are 3 specific hours. So it's 8 till 9 p.m. on Fridays, weekends, or public holidays. So other than that, children not allowed to game. And this is a huge step up. For example, a couple of years ago, they made it about 1.5 hours a day was the limit. But now this is the strictest to date, with a very prescribed amount of time that they're allowed to spend. And we've seen share prices in the big Chinese gaming companies, the likes of Tencent as well as NetEase, down around 3% as a result of this. But the country has tens of millions of online gamers, and there's been big concern for Beijing in recent years, really, about gaming addiction. With, for example, it was called a spiritual opioid just recently. So now they're, for example, pushing this time limit, but as well as making, for example, online gaming platforms say that they have to be linked to the state addiction systems, as well as trying to really push the future workforce to try and engage in what they see as more productive activities, Sean.
Interesting. Katie, thank you. Catch you again very soon. Katie Silver in Singapore for us this morning. That's the thing you're worried about with your kids. Has that changed during the pandemic as well? I think, parents have been allowing themselves a little bit more leeway, not beating themselves up quite so much about the amount of screen time their kids have had throughout lockdowns. But how much of that has stuck? The question's still coming. The expectations from your children that they can have the screen time that they've had when there was almost nothing else to do over the course of the last year. Another story that Parents of kids of a different age may be interested in this morning. In the Daily Mail, government may introduce levy on disposable brands to tackle landfill crisis, which has triggered the headline, Parents Face New Nappy Tax. Disposable nappies could be taxed to encourage parents to switch to green alternatives. Swetha Ramachandran with me this morning. Swetha, we're in now, the last sort of couple of months before the budget, and we're going to hear from the Chancellor about all big plans about tax rises. Will there be cuts, spending plans? And when it comes to the environment as well, how that plays into our habits and how green we are. Nappy tax, can that be one that's actually on the way?
Well, it could be possible considering the amount of household waste that's generated by disposable nappies and the fact that there are environmentally friendly alternatives available. To my mind, it recalls a lot, the plastic bag surcharge that supermarkets were required to impose, which similarly created a lot of uproar at the outset. But now, just looking back, since the institution of that plan, the number of bags that have been sold by major supermarkets has actually gone down by more than 95% in England. So I would say these tools at the outset may seem like blunt instruments, but over time they do yield results in that they nudge people towards different habits and behaviors.
Different habits and behaviours when it comes to our views on climate change. George is merging a few of our stories this morning, been in touch. New Cross, he says, I won't be flying again. I love my grandchildren too much. You can get to the Alps in 8 hours by train from St Pancras. Diane, George there, making the point that with a bit of effort, you could get on your skiing trip by taking the train. And many people do that.
Yep. Not as many as we'd like, and we need more demand so that more services are put on. It's my favourite way of going to the Alps, probably for the same reasons as George.
What do you do with all the gear?
Oh, you pack light. Be clever. You can wear your ski jacket. You hire your skis and boots out there, so you don't need to carry those, and they're often better. Actually, boots might be the exception to that. And how many clothes do you need when you're out there? Well, not that much. So, just be a little bit more economical. And I think the future is in that kind of travel.
Can I ask you, Diane, Zoom, the big video conferencing business that not many of us were aware of 18 months or so ago, but they've been updating everybody on how it's been getting on. It said demand for its services is still strong. Not surprisingly, revenues in the 3 months to the end of July rose 54% to just over $1 billion. But they don't think things are going to carry on the way they are going to be. The headlines, Zoom's tepid growth forecast takes shine off the $1 billion quarter. So although the number looks great right now, they suspect things are going to calm down for them quite considerably and maybe more than they previously thought. For you, are you starting, as people gear up for a September where there's going to be more meetings, people getting back into the swing of things, are you feeling like there'll be a lot less of that than before, or are you embracing it and going whole hog?
Actually, I think there will be less because during the pandemic, all day, every day, we were using Zoom and Teams to stay connected. It's the only means we've had and the most effective. And what we've all missed is that in-office contact where ideas and information flow, and there's just much more of a community spirit. And as a travel company where you are dealing with people's holidays and things move extremely quickly, having your team together in one room, actually, there's not much of a substitute for that. So we're moving to a hybrid working system, embracing both, but definitely the in-office contact. I think we've all recognised the value of that.
The next month is going to be a big one for lots of businesses, lots of workers around the UK, I think. I've had so many tell us, even though, the back to the office official message was changed in July and people were, sort of told that they could go back in and the message wasn't to work from home where you could. Loads of businesses were telling us, really, it's going to be September before we start making those decisions and before people start changing their habits as well. So the next few weeks will tell.
Wake up to money from BBC 5 Live.
James been in touch saying his late wife and he brought up his 3 boys on real nappies in the 1970s, with the last using a nappy service. Here in Hackney, says James, there's even a nappy service on a bike. So much better. Talking about nappies as the front page of the Mail this morning. Parents face new nappy tax. Will that be something that's on the cards in the coming week? Have you gone reusable? Nothing more pleasurable when you manage to get those inners whiter than white, as they've done it once with one child. With another child, we didn't quite manage to get on the way with reusables, and disposables was the way. And, you know, that you do feel a bit bad when everything is piling up.
Wake Up to Money from BBC 5 Live.
What are you doing with your takeaways now? Are you trying to use your local restaurants a bit more and actually using them in a delivery service to your home in a way that you wouldn't have done before the pandemic? Wake Up to Money has been finding out if our appetite for spending on takeout has changed since the lockdown. And long story short, it has. And it's heading in one direction. The average spend per person has gone up more than 40% over the last couple of years. So that's from £452 in 2019 to £641 over the course of 2021. And it's a growing trend, it looks like. We contacted some of the biggest fast food brands. They dominate the front pages of those apps, the delivery apps, don't they? McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut all say they've seen a surge in demand for takeout and delivery service. And, crucially, as we look ahead to the coming months, they're planning to make it a bigger part of their business in future. Now, tricky balance, isn't it, for restaurants, as they welcome back more diners. So many restaurants, it's what they do, isn't it? They want that face-to-face customer service and the joy of that experience that you might have. Wake Up to Money's Liz Mahi has been finding out all about it.
The heat is on in the kitchen of this Manchester restaurant as staff prep food for customers who'll be dining here later, as well as those who've ordered a meal to their home or workplace. Takeout and delivery were lifelines for restaurants closed in the pandemic, but 18 months on, these services are still very popular, presenting a delicate balancing act for restaurant owners.
On a Sunday night, you're getting a few orders, you would avoid sitting people close to the entrance. We'd always prioritise dining customers.
David Fox is co-founder of Tampopo. It's a small chain of Pan-Asian restaurants, and delivery is now a third of its business.
There's definitely an erosion of dine-in, so people can get restaurant quality food at home. Quite a large percentage of what we are generating are going to the delivery platforms.
Outside, I've spotted several riders weaving their way through Exchange Square, which is full of some of the casual dining names you'll find on the apps. Earlier, I called Harshad, who's working from home in London. He spends about £700 a month on lunch deliveries and doesn't see this habit changing.
I started it during the lockdown, but now I'm just kind of used to it. Just save time and effort. I think it's worth it.
Restaurants now have some important decisions to make as they juggle more takeout, deliveries, drive-through services and sit-in diners. I've spoken to Will Hawkley. He's a food industry expert at accountancy firm KPMG.
What we've heard from operators is that trend is here to stay and has basically, accelerated probably what change that would have happened in 3 to 5 years in the sector has happened in months when they reacted as the pandemic started with the takeaway, with then table ordering. Even your local pubs were switching and having apps for table ordering, which they would probably, never have had for a long, long time.
Looking around here in the city centre, as well as delivery riders, there are people having lunch at tables and those sitting on the steps here having a takeaway, like Sarah and Maria, who, like Harshad earlier, are sticking with the habits they developed during lockdown.
I think it's just got into a bit of a habit when we couldn't go out, I guess, so it's kind of like stuck since then, really. Yeah. I think, Friday nights, it was like, what can we do? Let's get a takeaway.
I work from home a couple of days a week, so I'll sometimes order breakfast as a little treat to start the day.
So much options on there, but we're trying to do it more locally recently, I guess, as well, because there's a few places that have been struggling.
So, what are you doing? Let us know. Peter Backman joins me now, restaurant delivery expert, has been watching the takeaway industry evolve. Peter, morning to you.
Morning, Sean.
I mean, we talk about evolve, Peter. The likes of yourself, you'd have all these predictions, how quickly we might pick up all of this stuff. And then boom, as we heard in the middle of that piece from Liz Mahi there, an acceleration that would normally have taken years happening in months. What does that mean in reality to the industry when that acceleration occurs?
Well, for a start, it means that during COVID, a lot of businesses were able to survive that wouldn't have done. So there are some businesses around now, and a lot, I think, that benefited from this shift towards delivery. Longer term, it's clearly very different from serving food in a restaurant. So if you've grown up you've developed your restaurant to deliver food to customers sitting at their table. That requires one style of working. Delivery requires something quite different, and sometimes you have to balance the two, both back of house in the kitchen and front of house in the serving area. So it means changing the way that you work. And fundamentally, delivery costs money. So restaurants that use delivery, the so-called aggregators, the names that one hears and sees people driving around on bikes on the high street and so on, all of those companies require up to a figure of perhaps over 35% per order in order to deliver the order to the restaurant, who then makes the food and then gets it delivered to the customer. So it's expensive, and it has an impact on the restaurant's profitability.
Does it have an impact on how much consumers are willing to spend? Because I've talked before on the show about, a particular dark moment for me, over the course of the pandemic was when I ordered a coffee to be delivered to my door. And I think I ended up paying like a $5 for it, and it did the job. And you know what? It made me feel good on that morning when, I just needed something like that. But I'd never have thought of doing that before. And I might not now, but how much more are people willing to spend on their food if it's just a click of a button on a phone?
Well, clearly they are. I don't think that applies to everybody or even the majority of people, but a lot of people are prepared to pay 5-10%, even more than that, to have something delivered to them rather than going out to the restaurant to eat it. So it hasn't deterred people from eating out and having food delivered. It's not really a major issue for an awful lot of people.
Diane Palumbo's with me this morning, a travel expert, but also, as we heard, takeout addict now, or trying to wean yourself off it. You mentioned the recycling issue and the amount of sort of plastic as a concern before, Diane. What about the cost and the quality of the food that you're getting? How much is that playing into how much you're spending from these restaurants now? You're getting so many deliveries.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. The experience is completely different because when the packets of food arrive when it's delivered, they are just that, they're packets, and you open them. And I always empty those packets onto a plate because it just feels more human to do it. But it is a very, very different experience. And I think certainly from our point of view, we're weaning ourselves off because we've started to visit restaurants and enjoy the in-restaurant experience, which is not decanting your food onto a plate before you eat it. So, I think it might be something like the Zoom question that you asked, that we all moved in that direction very vociferously, and there might be some gentle movement back and we go to a hybrid, because I prefer eating things off a plate rather than out of a packet.
And that's interesting, Peter, because a major change we've seen is these so-called dark kitchens. Just they are kitchens. There's no front of house where the food is being made. And it can be the same quality food, the same business, but they just don't have a restaurant alongside it. We've seen a rise in those. I mean, could that be a bit of a bubble, or are we going to see that continue? And will customers have the trust in those kitchens?
Well, taking your last point first, which I think is a very good one, trust in the kitchen. A lot of people don't realise that their food comes from a separated kitchen. They think it comes from a restaurant. So trust to a degree doesn't always enter into it. I totally agree with the notion that having a meal delivered to you at home is completely different from eating out in a restaurant, but people are prepared to pay for that experience. The way of delivering it through a dark kitchen makes an awful lot of sense from the restaurant operator's perspective, because cutting out the front of house, which is an expensive operation with the waiters and the rent and so on, if you cut that out, then you can afford that extra 30% that I mentioned before to have the food delivered. So it makes commercial sense. The degree to which the customer is overall prepared to accept delivery from here as we provide the opportunity to eat out in a restaurant again. I think that is a challenge for any restaurant kitchen operator. Can they make the offer really worthwhile for the consumer?
Interesting. Peter, thank you for being with us this morning. Peter Backman, restaurant delivery expert who's been following the takeaway industry there. And part of the battle for our cash, of course, are those pubs and restaurants around the country who want us in to their front of house. So were you out and about this bank holiday weekend? Did you get a meal or a short break anywhere? 60% of small and medium-sized hospitality firms were expecting to see a boost over the weekend, according to Barclaycard. It found 13% of those businesses predicted that this bank holiday would be their busiest in a decade. So how much is all our changing habits having on those pubs? Here's Sarah Craig, owner of the Turk's Head, a pub in Lincoln. She took over just 5 weeks before the first lockdown. Morning to you, Sarah. Morning. So, you've just been hearing us talk about, the battle for where people are spending their cash when they want a bit of a treat. How's the weekend been for you?
Really busy. Yeah,
Great.
Really, really busy.
What above expectations?
Definitely, yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
good.
it's difficult to tell because it's our first bank holiday with no restrictions, but yeah, it was more than we expected.
And what were people spending the money on?
Well, we had a big charity event on the Sunday, a bit of a fun day to raise money for Macmillan. So, yeah, we had stalls and bits and pieces, barbecues. So, yeah, a lot of people came down, I think, just to socialise, really, and get out. And
Do you feel like you've got a battle with the delivery sector right now?
No, I don't really. I think people have got to the stage where they want to be out more, and I think people are just tired of being at home.
And in terms of, people's confidence of spending, report out today saying that business confidence has jumped to its highest level in more than 4 years. People are seeing pay rises stronger than they have done for a few years. Do you expect that to sort of feed through in your business to be able to benefit from confidence that others have around the country? Yeah,
I hope so. I think people are still a little bit wary about spending their money, especially not knowing what's going to happen in the near future. But yeah, I'm hoping that we'll see a few more people through the doors.
Swetha Ramachandran is with me, watches the numbers in the economy from GAM Investments. Swetha, that idea of consumer confidence, businesses being more confident, say Lloyds, than they have for 4 years. Who's going to be benefiting from that now?
Yeah, we are seeing, the UK economy, just to step back, declined in GDP by nearly 10% in 2020. We've now clawed back a large proportion of that decline, but the economy is still about 4% below where it was before the coronavirus pandemic hit. And so, wholesale, retail trade, those are the key components that are contributing at the moment. Manufacturing, services, and construction, these are industries where confidence is particularly high. And certainly the labor market shortages have also boosted employee hopes in terms of negotiation power with their employers. And I think the prospects for wages now are much brighter than they were at any point in the last, since the financial crisis of 2008. And that in itself is a self-fulfilling prophecy because consumer spending accounts for nearly 2/3 of UK GDP. And as wage earners take home more, they then have the capacity to spend more as well. Savings rates have been quite elevated in the UK. They peaked at 25% in the spring of 2020. They're coming down, but they're still above 15% compared to pre-pandemic levels of 7 to 8%. So that boost in confidence that employees and workers are feeling right now is also allowing them to spend some of these accumulated savings.
It feels like, Swetha, almost every shop or cafe that I walked into over the last few weeks has a sign up saying we're recruiting, and they have different strategies for trying to do that. Now, what's the balance here between, it's great that workers have a bit more power when it comes to pay and conditions and what they want out of the job career-wise as well. So that clearly businesses are having to step up a bit there. But if we can't as a nation get our workers, is the economy being hit by this?
Well, I think right now we're still seeing the furlough scheme winding down. So there's still about 5 to 6% of the UK population that's on furlough. One of the big concerns you may remember is what was going to happen to the labour market as the furlough scheme winds down. And in fact, what we're seeing is no sign really at this point of mass redundancies. There's plenty of room in the labour market to absorb these workers who are coming off furlough. So some of these issues could well be temporary. We just need to wait until the furlough scheme has run out by the end of September to see what proportion of those workers will actually make it back to the workforce to smooth out the areas where there are presently shortages.
Sarah, have you got one of those signs up in your pub?
I have, yes.
What does it say on yours?
Chef wanted.
And is it doing the job? Do you get people coming to the bar and saying, "Oh, I see you've got a sign up there. Can I get a bit more info?"
Absolutely not.
Right.
I've had, since we started looking the beginning of June for a second chef, I think I've had 2 people apply and 2 people not turn up for the interview.
Where does that leave you?
Struggling, yeah. Our one and only chef is very tired, working very hard, and we're just very lucky that we've got an old chef that used to work here that went on and got another job a few years ago. He's doing our 2 busiest nights of the week, so yeah, he's helping out a little bit, which is a massive help. Otherwise, yeah, I think we would really be struggling.
I was going to ask you if you started doing deliveries, but I can't see where you'd have the space.
No, we've actually had to cut down one night a week on food just to give the chef a couple of days off.
That's amazing, isn't it? And so do you get some customers sometimes on that night, coming in and asking the question?
Yeah, especially through the holidays. Now, we're not far off like a little country park with, tents, camping, glamping, that sort of thing. So obviously they're busy at the moment and they haven't got a restaurant on their site. So, yeah, we get quite a lot of people through the summer that have come down.
Have you got a plan B? If you're not actually able to recruit the chef that you need, what are you going to do?
I've absolutely no idea. I think sooner or later my chef she's going to want a holiday. So I don't know. I just keep plodding on and keep trying. But there's 4 pubs just around the local villages around me that are all looking for chefs.
Well, something drastic is going to have to change, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, hopefully, while you eke a bit more out of your chef now before she gets a holiday, do let her have one but at some point. But it's great to hear that you've been busy over the weekend. Sarah Craig, owner of the Turk's Head, that pub in Lincoln. Stuart in Timperley's just been in touch saying, might just be me, but I found this explosion in the restaurant delivery service really off-putting as a restaurant goer. Last 2 visits we've done were spoiled with the constant coming and goings of the drivers and the restaurant staff, passing takeaway orders through the front door every 2 to 3 minutes. Not very relaxing when you're sat in the restaurant trying to communicate and enjoy your meal. Interesting dilemma. Diane, you follow the ski industry very closely. I mean, is the recruitment issue starting to broaden out right across the travel industry as well now?
Yes and no, in that Brexit has obviously had an effect on our ability to get UK citizens to work in Europe. So what's happened to us is many of our former seasonaires, as we'd call them, have been so fearful about their ability to go and work in Europe now that we have to have visas and work permits to do so, that many of them have not come forward to apply. It's only in the last few months that we've established that we can get people to work in France, in our case, and to a degree in Austria. And the people haven't really been coming forward. So we're wanting to communicate to them and saying, look, there is still increased red tape. It's not as easy as it used to be. In my day, I got on a coach and found myself in a ski resort, and lo and behold, I started working. That's not the case anymore. There is paperwork to go through, but you can still do it. So we're hoping with that change in messaging, we'll have more people coming forward to take advantage of all the opportunities that gives you. But I think the other constraining factor for the travel industry is 50 changes in rules around coming back into the UK for consumers. We are seeing consumer confidence in spending. We've got a lot of lookers, not bookers, on our website. A lot of people are looking at holidays and aspiring, but there are constraining factors on them going that we need to address, really.
Interesting. Rachel in Harrogate just said, morning, Sean. Morning to you, Rachel. Maybe the solution for the businesses that have a recruitment problem is to hire someone without experience and train them up. Start training now. You're future-proofing your business. Is it as straightforward as that? Let us know. If you are one of the people who will be refreshing their phone all day today on transfer deadline day for the Premier League, the EFL, many European leagues as well, well, while you're refreshing your phone, no need. Just have 5 Live on in the background all day. You have the very latest in all the transfer news. Premier League clubs spent £962 million so far. Might seem like a lot, but last year's summer window ended up at £1.3 billion. It's been those big names in the world getting the headlines, hasn't it? Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, will Kylian Mbappe join them in making a big move? Dr. Dan Plumley is a football finance specialist, academic at Sheffield Hallam University. Big day for Dan. Morning to you, Dan.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning. What's the big story this year, Dan?
Oh, take your pick, Sean, I think, isn't it? You just mentioned a few there. We've seen, Lionel Messi move from, a financially stricken Barcelona that we perhaps never thought would happen. And then, the news on Friday of Ronaldo to Manchester City and then off again as quickly, and then immediately Manchester United back in the picture. So I think those are the two biggest moves, obviously the two biggest footballers on the planet as well.
How's this all working though, Dan? Because most businesses that, saw their income plummet over the course of a year, if they hadn't had any people attending, like football clubs couldn't around the world, their income literally fallen off a cliff at one point. How are they able to afford the wages of these players? That Jack Grealish going to Man City for £100 million, Chelsea getting Romelu Lukaku for £97.5 million. The list goes on and on for some of these mega moves.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk about big players and we're talking, look at where they've gone and, it's to the big clubs. And it has been a quiet window for many clubs, as you've said, and we expected that as well because of the pandemic. But if you look at, the numbers of total spending are high in comparison to last year, as you've said. But if you look at where that spending has been concentrated, it's within, the more dominant clubs in the market. And that, again, comes back to the thing we've said many times about, football finance and how it's structured, particularly in the Premier League and across, some of the big leagues in Europe. It's the big clubs that are in the best position to dominate. And we see that in the transfer market.
And when it comes to, let's say we get the I's dotted and the T's crossed on the Cristiano Ronaldo deal today, we know it's going ahead. How much will Manchester United be looking at, whatever that's costing them, several £100,000 a week in wages, it seems, and it could be tens of millions of pounds in transfer fees. How much do they look at just benefit for their team, and how much will they be looking right now at shirt sales or, to bring it into 2021, Instagram likes and the money they can make from all of that?
Yeah, of course. It's more the latter there. In that case, we know that the shirt sale, element is a bit of a myth. Adidas will retain most of that money from the shirt sales, and clubs don't make a lot of money generally off shirt sales. But if you look at somebody like Cristiano Ronaldo, and he's got more Instagram followers than all of the 20 Premier League clubs combined, and that's the kind of level that you're talking at, and it's how Manchester United will look to leverage that. Obviously, it's not as simple as saying that every one of those followers is going to turn into X amount of, hundreds of pounds of spending, but there is a way to leverage Cristiano Ronaldo. And we've got a lot of young people nowadays that follow footballers and sports stars. They don't necessarily follow teams, and that there is laid out in the figures of just how popular this player is, and not just his on-pitch impact for the next couple of years, but also what he can do for Manchester United off the pitch.
And if we go down a few divisions, what's the theme for the transfer market right now for those that don't have the hundreds of millions or billions in the bank to rely upon?
That's it, and I think the other side of this market, and it is the opposite end of two extremes, is clubs that are looking at free transfers, out of contract players, loan market, which will still be open a little bit longer after the window closes today. And that's the reality for a lot of, in England, the Football League and a lot of its clubs. We don't see big spending in those leagues simply because the money's not there, and they have been really impacted by the pandemic, as we've said before. And again, we've got this, polar opposite situation where the money is very much at the top of the game in English football still.
And it's at the top of the game in English football. Does it feel to you like the money is sort of leaving English football and going around Europe, or is it actually staying, and does it drip down eventually?
I think it varies, doesn't it? Obviously, we've got, the situation at Barcelona is something that's happened over the last couple of years. They're normally a really dominant financial powerhouse in big difficulty at the minute. But we've seen, PSG obviously with the backing of the owners they've got and the wealth that they've got, and even somebody like a Bayern Munich who again have looked to hoover up the talent in the Bundesliga and buy all their rivals' best players again in this window. So it still happens across the leagues. I think if you look at the Premier League, some of that money has gone overseas, but also you mentioned the Jack Grealish transfer, and that's an internal transfer, and then Aston Villa have spent that money as well. So it does vary depending on which player we're talking about.
Dan, thanks so much for being with us this morning. Big day for those following their teams to see if you make any final signings or sales today. Dr. Dan Plumley there from Sheffield Hallam University, football finance specialist. Big thanks to Diane Palumbo as well, who's with us from Seasonal Businesses in Travel. And good luck to Sarah's chef, working hard, as we heard earlier. Thanks to Swetha as well. That's it from Wake Up to Money this morning. We'll be back tomorrow.
Wake Up to Money from BBC 5 Live.
That's it from Wake Up to Money. You can download the podcast every Monday to Friday, so please make sure you subscribe. We'd also love it if you left us a review when you do. Get in touch, keep the conversation going anytime as well on social media. Use the hashtag Wake Up to Money.
Okay, what gets you pressed? Number one topic, men. I knew it.
I don't like stingy men in the world.
Pressure of females, like the standard that we have to be at. Yeah. There's a couple things on social media that really gets me pressed.
Hey guys, it's Maren Musa.
It's your girl, Adela Patron. It's your girl, Nella Rose.
We're going to be here with our new podcast talking about everything that gets us pressed and you guys pressed.
We ain't scared of any subject. We don't make no apologies. And that's on what?
Period. Pressed.
Listen on BBC Sounds.